Hi, this is Lester Martin with Hortonworks University, and I want to take a few minutes, and as part of the Hadoop Essentials offering that we have, I wanted to take a few minutes and run us through the demonstration called Operational Overview with Ambari. And as you can see from my screen, this project is in GitHub under Hortonworks University / Essentials. And off that main README, there's a link to Operational Overview with Ambari. So first thing, it makes sense to just kind of scope out what Embari's primary initiatives, primary features are, and as you see in this bulleted list here, they're around laying down the software bits, the configuration, etc. So definitely installations, upgrades, and ongoing configuration of a cluster. But it definitely is a tool for as our cluster grows, hopefully larger than smaller, but expansions or even compactions of the cluster size, and life cycle operations such as starting and stopping and even kind of maintenance modes of operations, and then finally monitoring. So just take a few minutes and run you through some of these key areas. Probably the first thing to think about is just simply getting a dime tour of Ambari. So Ambari is a web-based tool, as you're seeing here, as a logging in. And when you do log into Ambari, the first thing you, as an operator, is you see the dashboard. This dashboard, as the README file there on GitHub says, we're using our Hortonworks sandbox. So we do have a very limited cluster here, but maybe at first glance you'll kind of notice there's a variety of services installed on this environment. And again, on the initial splash page is what we call our dashboard, as you see here. So there's a number of monitoring things that might show up, some high level things about how's memory going, how's the disk going, some specific information on HBase and other things. Everything's drillable, uptime, and those kinds of things. So this is just our quick dashboard. If I give you just a few minute rundown, along the left is the list of services I mentioned. It's kind of a quick shortcut. There are other ways to get there, and they have some familiar icons such as red light, green light, yellow light concepts. So a lot of green lights. That's good. The little icon that looks like a first aid message is what we call our maintenance mode, just simply a way to suppress error messages, etc. So if you're doing some maintenance or stopping for a period of time, or maybe you just want to turn the service off for a while, you're not using that feature today, that's definitely a way to do that. And as we look across the top, another way to get to all those services, and I'll just pick on one of those services, such as maybe Yarn, for example. Once you click into a particular service via those different options, you get some high level information about that particular service. You'll get some monitoring information. Again, I have a very limited cluster with a lot of the monitoring not enabled just because it does take some resources and I'm very resource constrained. That's definitely how you get there. And usually a summary task, some if possible some kind of metrics that matter. Just glance at some of the options there, and then probably sweet spot of Ambari is configurations. And what you're seeing here is some of the advanced Ambari wizard-like configuration, or at least graphical tool-like configuration, as well as, so you see those, as well as our some classic, good old-fashioned, more of a HTML form of a XML file, a lot of forms, names, and key value pair type information that also gets there. Very highlighted as you see on the right there as you mouse over things, you get a lot of details. And what we call quick links. So if that service has some specific UIs or experiences that make sense, we also get there. So hosts, alerts, what are the n number of machines? We have one single machine that all this runs on, but if I had 100 machines, I'd list those here. And again, a few other mechanisms to enable some more details, configurations around alerts. So that's a quick overview, just real fast of Ambari. But I'll focus on again these kind of bulleted lists, these function areas. So Ambari, without Ambari, our options really are: do we do a manual installation? And I want to take a moment and just simply say, if you go to our Hortonworks docs.hortonworks.com site and you follow that link I provided there on GitHub, you'll find out really quickly that we do have a very supported a model that does not involve Ambari, but it does span. It's pretty exhaustive. So this document from page say 33 all the way to 216, I believe, is focused on setting up all these various services. So about 200 pages of information. If I look at that same doc here, I'll leave it side by side. The same doc in with Ambari, the good news is that the real installation activities for Ambari kick in at about page 22 and they wrap up around 40. So I'm less than 20 pages of information here. And those pages, that's about a 10% reduction for sure. But just as importantly, I think it's worth saying that, as this kind of says here on my screen as I'm talking here, that the majority of what you're going to do in Ambari is from that graphical tool we just looked at, as opposed to a bunch of command line operations. And if we wanted to see just a snippet of what that might look like is we always have the opportunity to add services that maybe we don't have installed today or maybe come along in a future upgrade. Now this cluster, as you see, these big green areas suggest that all these services are already installed, only a handful aren't. So I'm going to select Accumulo. That's one of the NoSQL systems that we support and we bundle as part of um, the HDP distribution. And really, I'm not going to run you through these screens here, but I'm just going to show you that this wizard-like setting up services, assigning masters, workers, customizing, etc., is very similar to what you would see when you do an installation from scratch. So I'm just going to click through a handful of those and maybe get to this page about customizing the services, just so you can see that you even get to supply those very fine-grained details. Now I'm going to stop at this point. I was going to let it paint here a second, and it's just asking me to set some values that have to be required. I'm just going to simply exit out of the wizard and stop that process from running. It really, again, it was just to focus on showing what that might look like from an installation perspective. Configuration is another, kind of big animal, and I'll point out, if you look at maybe this, what we're calling this figurative example. So if I just take a quick snapshot and look at this diagram here, you'll see quickly that Hadoop as a whole, lays data down all over the place on the file system. So I'm going to go back, and not just on one file system, but all the machines. If I had 100 machines in my cluster and 100 locations in there. And I'll point out, just so you can have a point of reference, some of those files really are just XML files for the most part. And I'm down on that machine, and those files usually are in etc, usually the service name and then conf, and they usually are files such as this HiveSite.xml there. That's a very similar one. So I'm going to leave that screen up. Well, let me just jump in that file, HiveSite.xml. And for fun, I want to show you a property called the execution engine, I believe. Yeah, there we go. So this particular property you see right here, this name value pair Hive execution engine is equal to TES. That's a pretty popular setting. Let me just quit out of that console just because I want to show you what that looks like via Ambari to make a change to that setting. So I go to my service, Hive in this case, so could have done it here, could have done it here. And as I mentioned, you get some summary information and you have configurations. So if I look at the configuration for Hive, just like before, there's this notion of settings where we have some visual controls that you see is going by here, and then maybe some more detail via the advanced. I'm going to focus on the visual controls because that's where that particular setting happens to be. And in this case, it's really just a simple pull down. TES, and in fact, if as I mouse over, you'll see that Hive.execution engine right just up to the right of where my icon is was that property. Someone that really understands the internals of Hadoop would understand that, but for the folks that don't, that's what this tool is really good for. At least even for the folks that understand that this tool makes that process a whole lot easier. So as you see there on the right, it expects either MR or TES for MapReduce or TES, and in fact that's the two options I have available. I'll go ahead and suggest select that MapReduce, and then I'm going to hit save. I want to make that configuration change. Here's my opportunity example change, just to show that notes that you could put some kind of note here with that information. and make that change. Now that's a pretty exhaustive change. It lets you know there's some other things that relate to that, so I'll just proceed anyway just to make this point. And what Ambari not only did is maintain in a configuration database that change has been made. It also lets me know, hey, I have to restart a few components to make that happen. Now I don't want to change that setting. I really just want to show a few other things, such as the fact that we can do differences between versions. So what I just indicated is just show me what's changed from V13 to V14. And in fact, visually here, just that simple change in those graphical tools by version, by checkbox, etc. And since I don't really want to make that change, I am also going to simply click on this guy, and I'm going to revert back to that particular one. So I'm going to say make that setting the current version, and Ambari will go ahead and realize that it happened. In fact, he'll notice that hey, I don't have to actually make a change, and we're back and off and running. So I still have all those version checks that I can do back to back. So that from configuration alone, that's a huge driving factor for Ambari. It makes a lot of sense to me. And just to round it out, some additional things, expansions, kind of lifecycle operations and monitoring. Kind of touched on those very at the very beginning there by the fact that I have a list of hosts here. If I need to add more hosts, I add a host and follow the wizard. And by the fact that Ambari has all those bits and pieces configuration, he can lay that down very well, control the rollout of that for you. Start and stopping is very simple in this world. You really just need to go to find that particular service that you're thinking about. We'll select Uzi, for example, and you use what we call service actions: stop, restart all, etc. And as part of those stopping activities, we have an opportunity to put in this maintenance mode that I kind of mentioned. Why maintenance mode? Because maintenance mode actually is going to help us with the monitoring side of the house by the fact that we can silence alarms that would normally be related to Ambari. So these nice big lists of green all over the place. When alarms are going off, we get a lot of red. Flume, we get an alarm with flume. That's okay. We purposely don't want to focus on that. But that's a way to silence those activities. And the nice thing about monitoring is it's a sophisticated framework all by itself and can be integrated into your additional kind of more exhaustive across the data center type monitoring technologies you have. So that's my quick operational overview with Ambari. I hope it was useful, and I thank you for your time.